So we move forward to the second panel discussion of the day on creating engaging audio content, for which I would like to invite Ms. Ishani Dasgupta, lead podcast partnerships Jiofuns, Kiran Nityanand, SVP Emerging Business Rangeline Entertainment, Abby Thomas, CEO Reliance Broadcast, Ishtiaq Ahmed, National Head Digital Red FM, Aditya Kuber, co-founder Idea Brew Studios. This session will be moderated by Mr. Sunil Doshi, creative entrepreneur, producer, and specialist on adaptations. We welcome you all and over to you, Mr. Doshi.
Now, since the introduction of podcasting around 2005 by Apple, India has now become the third largest podcast consuming listening market with about 58 million monthly users. And we are following China and United States. In many ways, I think podcast has been such an intimate medium with the fatigue of the visual medium, and more so that has been stuck in the last 1.5 years due to pandemic. I think it has become such a personal, intimate, and deeply engaging medium. And I would say that podcast has given the kind of a rise of a new intellectual in a manner of speaking. While videos can get, the streamers can get sometimes a little shallow, a little oversimplistic content, the same things being told about the dark stories and the violence in a different episodes, in a different shows. The podcast has been able to offer such a wide and a variety of diverse content of all types, right from spiritual, religion, to true crime, to self-help, motivation, and many other things. And, it's currently reaching over 40 millions of Indian, about 500 million internet users. We are yet to go. I have the most wonderful a panel consisting of Abe Thomas, Ishtiaq, Ishani, Kiran, who are all together, actually who are doing the grassroots work in creating and engaging and deeply immersive content of audio storytelling. So I would like Abe to start that. How do you see this emerging and creating new content and new idiom for this business, Abe, if I may start with you?
Thanks, Sunil, and I completely agree. I think these are really exciting times, and if Anil Banwari thinks it's worthwhile to spend half an hour out of his content hub on audio and podcasts, we've definitely arrived. So thanks, Anil, for doing this. Yes, I mean, see, I think if I were to just succinctly put what are the 4 or 5 things which makes digital audio and podcasts a huge opportunity, is that unlike in video, the quality between a digital DTH video and an internet video is not that substantial. But in audio, there is an opportunity to really ramp up the quality. So quality from sheer sound and production, as well as quality of the content itself. And I mean, all of us have best examples are if you look at the daily from the New York Times, the way that show is produced with, it's a completely, it's a great produced piece of audio. So so that's the first point. I think that kind of helps, gives our digital audio a great push. Second is that unlike video, this is not a viral business, right? This is a habit forming. So consistency, sustainability, predictability of when those different episodes are coming become a factor. So you're not really trying for one random viral, which you can only figure out after it's become viral, but you're actually trying to build a habit. And so I think that's the other strong point of it. Third is interesting statistic. I think I was reading somewhere that 80% of podcast consumption is around news. Yeah, while only 20% of podcast production is on news, 80% of the consumption right now seems to be towards daily news. So while podcasts, by definition, does also mean that it's timeless content, and then you can actually listen to it whenever you want to. It There is a lot of local live kind of content that also kind of brings podcasts to the fore. And lastly, since bulk of the podcast content are listened to uh, via headphones, they are extremely engaging and intensively listening, which makes it that much more impactful. And the beauty is you're actually getting this at a time when all other content media are practically blocked out. This is a time when you're not watching video. This is a time when you're not reading, because you're either multitasking or you're intently listening. So it makes it that much more impactful.
I would like to go to Ishani, considering that audio has become the most preferred medium in the last year over cinema and television obsessed countries. No Filter with Neha and many other innovation and initiatives at Jiofuns that you are taking, Ishani. What are your reflections and observations on these?
So, thank you for your question. It's a pleasure to be here amongst this incredible panel. To answer your question, like Jiofuns actually got into the audio streaming, non-music audio streaming space or podcasts way back in 2016, right? There was large potential within this market that was identified way back then. And from then, we have seen over the last 5 years, at least, we've seen tremendous increase in engagement from where we were in 2016 to where we are at today, right? The original, the perspective that we had when we got into it was to start, as you rightly pointed out, right? As Abe rightly pointed out, it is a habit. Consuming podcasts is ultimately a habit-forming medium, right? So we decided to sort of leverage formats and genres of content that the Indian audience is largely already familiar with, and try and bring those into a podcast format so that it would help build that habit forming listening, build the larger listening habit among consumers. When it comes to our marquee properties like No Filter Neha or Kahani Express with Nilesh Misra, we have seen a tremendous uptick in consumption and engagement with these formats. But over the last 5 years, we have also diversified the sort of genres of content that Jiofuns actually produces, right? We've sort of leveraged the larger community building habit and started serving content in, say a kids and family genre. We've seen intense, as I said, engagement with these formats as well. So last year, we actually released a podcast called Raising Parents, which essentially falls in the kids and parenting or kids and family category. This is away from your larger Bollywood-centric, film and TV-centric storytelling content genres, and provides audiences with a completely new format altogether. Right at the get-go, we weren't entirely sure of how well this podcast would perform. Obviously, we had some faith in the actual concept, which is why Jiofuns had taken it live. But over the last year, we've seen a huge amount of proclivity and sort of interaction with Raising Parents as well as a format. Aside from this, we've also taken on, played around with overall content duration and format, because if we are to serve, long duration, shows that have episodes that are anywhere between 45 and 60 minutes long, you can't entirely expect a first-time podcast listeners to engage with a 60-minute long audio piece. That's not going to happen. So what we've also tried to do, to address that, is to also produce shorter format content to get audiences hooked onto the habit of listening. If, asking someone to listen to 5 or 10 minutes of content isn't really taking out a lot out of their day to sort of build out that habit of listening to a podcast, as opposed to getting someone to listen to 45 to 60 minutes of content.
Got it. Aditya, you've spent many, many years in this business, and podcast, as you know, is a flourishing and the hottest corner in the media currently. Do you think this money and attention that it is garnering or gathering, will it stifle the DIY approach or a spirit that has driven much of its success in the podcast? over a lot of investments by advertising firms, ad tech firms, and film industry and media tech companies. Do you think it will stifle the creativity and the spirit of DIY?
Oh, actually, to the contrary, a lot of DIY creators have great voice. They have a lot of stories to tell, but to them, motivation comes in two forms. One is audience growth. Second, of course, is revenue. Audience growth is something which is driven by platforms and partners like Jiofuns and others. The revenue aspect is definitely which motivates them, turns them into high quality creators. DIY creators, I'll be honest, can take you so far beyond a point for their shows, for their content to grow, to reach a broader audience. You definitely want to see some monetization, some revenue coming in. And I think the more brands, the more ad tech companies start seeing value in this, it's only going to improve the quality and the quantity of content that comes through. So I think it's actually quite to the contrary.
And Ishtiaq, what do you feel?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, so as I was saying, that being the hottest corner of the media industry currently, do you think these new investments and ad tech and all this larger plethora of things is going to stifle the spirit of DIY of the people who are creating this kind of a podcast, who cannot necessarily go to a video streaming platform as yet because they are starting out and all that kind of thing? Will it stifle or will it flourish? That was
no, Sunil. I mean, thank you so much on the Content Hub for inviting me. I mean, and this amazing panelists. I mean, some of them I've worked with.
We have to thank Mr. Anil Gulpari, Sana Khan.
Yeah,
do these things. Yeah,
right. So certainly, and this is going to flourish. I mean, see, typically, if you see a typical podcast content, it is mostly conversational in form. I mean, okay, and a conversational base and a content is can be very easily swung, I mean, into the DIY category, and that will only enhance experience. It can address different genres, different niches. I mean, so and with ad tech growing up, I mean, it will only flourish. I mean, I don't see it moving south in any ways.
Kiran, you have been in a business of providing, and you as a kind of a range and group of companies has been one of the prolific producer of audio content, with many of your companies actually are onto the top list of Spotify's and all that. What has been your experiences with the rise of consumption of audio content in the country vis-a-vis the existing?
Thanks, Sunil. Great to meet all of you. I've met Ishani and Aditya in the past, so we have worked together. Pleasure to connect with you, Ibrahim and Ishtiaq. So Sunil, thank you for that question. I think the last year in my mind is the year that's probably shaped the consumption of podcasting for the years to come in India. I think prior to the lockdown, India would have hardly been there in terms of consumption. I think Ishani would probably be a testament in terms of how the numbers have gone up because of how they track. But I think our experience has been threefold, Sunil. I think one, the first 6 months of the pandemic, I think fueled the rise of consumption in podcasts. I think thanks to probably a shortfall of content in TV. I mean, people didn't want to watch the same content in TV over and over again because production was in a way halted. So I think they were explorative. They really looked out for newer forms of content. Second, I think that once they explored, that was the exploration part. I think then in terms of stickiness, I think they just found a plethora of content across genres that they really didn't know earlier. So some of our experiences have been that in the last year, I think there are typically 3 genres that have done very well for us, and we have had a play in each of them. I think the first is true crime. I think all of us, including the ones on the panel here, I'm sure have a dark side. We love crime, we love murder, we love horror. So that genre, typically, like how it continues to do well on video, had its impact on in audio as well. And there are multiple shows that have actually done well. The second one, I think, has been in the realm of wellness. I think the pandemic sort of got everybody nervous, worried about what's happening, and they were just scouting around for that feel-good factor. And I think that was testimony to us when we did a simple podcast with the Art of Living Foundation and Sri Ravi Shankar. And the kind of response that got was, I think, mind-blowing. I think people just, it's something which is very easy. It's something which they just wanted to consume. They wanted to see the positivity around. So I think, which is why the realm of spirituality, wellness continue to do well. And I think another genre that has done well, I think it's also testimony to what Ishani said, and your question, Sunil, on No Filter Neha, is that kind of genre with certain celebrity influences has also seen a bit of an uptick. It needn't be grade A celebs. I think there have been the next level of celebrities also who have got into it. Maybe some for the love of podcasting and some just to try it. So we've had some good successes with simple talk shows wherein there was a show that we did called Three Secrets of Success, which was essentially taking a motley crew of achievers in different segments across Bollywood, across sports, across radio, across entertainment. And they just gave those three mantras. So even a simple theme like that had the potential to actually get listeners on board. So I think, in short, Sunil, we have warmed up to podcasting in a big way. I see that continue to stick around. And I do see people opening up, or listeners opening up to multiple more segments. And I think there are certain opportunities, and the likes of JioSavan, Audible, and Spotify all need to try that out. I think kids, very less tested right now, but I think it's got a it's got a biggest opportunity out here, because as a parent, I don't want to give screen time, right? So I think that genre is something which we would definitely like, along with platforms, to develop along with them. So I think that could probably be the future genre to look forward to.
No, thank you, Kiran. Now that this particular medium is really flourishing well, and for streamers and for industry as such, I think the rapid evolution of podcasting as an industry has become a kind of a frothy market to identify and discover new IPs for adaptations and all that. While there has been many instances in the West with lore, with modern love, unwanted, and many other things, what we don't see here much in our country is that, is podcasting as a business, as an industry, is it truly a farmland for industry to pick up stories, for adaptations to screen and beyond? Has anybody created a graphic novel based out of a podcast? Has anybody created a series or a feature films out of a podcast? I now leave this to anyone who wants to really pick up, because this is a very important evolution of the industry, right? So here we are, if anybody wants to pick up this.
Yeah, so can I come in on this? So at Red, I mean, what we have done is, last week, I mean, we have just launched a podcast called the Audio Film Project. Okay, it's been directed by Vikram Bhatt, and he has voiced it. He's the showrunner, I mean, for that particular podcast. Clearly, I mean, there is a certain vision, I mean, behind this whole IP. First of all, it is not at all conversational. It's a storytelling, and with a high quality production and format. We are calling it an audio film project only because this is one storytelling, I mean, that is without visual. Clearly, somewhere the vision is, first we want to make this popular purely as an audio property. So this is getting telecasted, I mean, at one of the prime slot, I mean, on radio, and at the same time also getting released, I mean, on various podcast platforms. The initial feedback, we are just 3 episodes down as of today, I mean, and the initial feedback loop that we have built in our internal system has been really encouraging. I mean, so like there was a clear launch plan that went into it, a 10-day launch and a pre-hype activity. And the day one sampling that has happened, I mean, on the radio as well as on the podcast, I mean, I can see there is a consistent retention when it comes to episode 2, episode 3. There is a good completion rate, I mean, that we can see. So yeah, the effort is, I mean, in a nascent industry of this sort, I mean, let's create something, I mean, which can be a good, the starting point is an audio format, I mean, and then gets into a visual format. Yeah.
So I'd also like to add to what Isyaka said and to your question, right, Sunil? If we're looking at video adaptations from purely audio IP or audio formats, right, I think it's important for us to take a step back when we're looking at this from an Indian market perspective. When we're looking, podcasting on the whole is still breaking into the Indian market, which means that we still have a long way to go to start getting people accustomed to listening and popularize really good quality podcast IP first, right? Once we've made or had some success with that at an industry-wide level, not at a individual publisher level or a platform level, but at an industry-wide level, once you've had enough people engage with podcasts and start streaming more and more, then that's when you build value for IP to then lend itself to video adapts or any other form of exploitation of said IP, right? Whether it's to text, whether it's to video, whether it's anything else. But flipping it, just sort of taking a different approach to your question, there is a lot of scope for interaction between video and audio when you're looking at it just at an IP level, right? At Jiofuns, what we did this was in 2019 when Amazon Prime Video launched their series For More Shots Please. We actually, as an overall branded solution, customized solution for the brand as as part of their marketing efforts as well, we actually created a companion podcast for that show. So there is also scope to look at it not just from a perspective where you are just simply adapting existing IP, but also how are we extending and merging both video and audio to provide more of a holistic content experience to consumers. So there is tremendous scope for companion audio for existing, say, video IP formats that exist, right? This is also, there's huge, biggest example over here is the appointment of a global podcast lead or head by Netflix. That happened very recently, which also shows that Netflix, which is a purely video-based platform or a video-first platform, has also now understood the value of merging both these formats. And it's my opinion is that both video and audio can definitely coexist. It is going to take within India. It's going to take a little bit of time for us to get to that point, but I feel that work has already started on this front.
No, I hear you. Sorry.
Sorry. So just to add to what Ishani is saying, that she's right. The work has already begun. I mean, we work with movie studios already, and there is work that's going on to scope out existing podcasts, use podcasts as a means of validation for audience interest, and then extend those to other formats. So that work is actually underway. We might see something as early as next year, where podcast has been brought to another format.
Abe, would you have to say something on this?
Sorry, yeah. So I think with the growth of and the explosion of video that we've seen, audio is getting its due finally. And there is a certain amount of fatigue which is creeping in because of too much of video. And audio is a very one-on-one, emotionally involving kind of medium. I think one of the best examples is one of our biggest IPs that we've created is the storytelling format with Nilesh Mishra. I mean, he is clearly one of our biggest shows, and we have a similar one with Anu Kapoor. And both these shows have been going on successfully for many years, and they are also in the top trending shows on Spotify because they're also now available as podcasts on Spotify. So I think one of the fundamental prerequisites for this place to really boom is the monetization of this property. Brands are recognizing power of storytelling. Brands want to now kind of ride on stories which are not too in your face, at the same time drive their brand values and stuff like that. And I think there are numerous examples of how brands have partnered with the Nilesh Mishra show, and where very subtly their values have been woven into the storyline itself. So I think while consumption, I think one of the biggest challenges is consumption of podcast and digital audio is booming, is exploding. I think it's just a matter of time that advertisers and brands get onto that bandwagon, and I think we have to facilitate that, because there is a old world understanding of what it can give me to what the new world understanding is what it can actually do for your brand. So I think that is a challenge. And moment more and more brands start riding onto this, you'll suddenly see the game changing.
Now, since we have a very short time left, I just want to focus and veer towards something giving back to the society. Spotify, in a way, has started a kind of an accelerator program, Sound Up, which aims to bring the underrepresented or unrepresented talent into the medium, and actually, a rare opportunity to really cultivate them into a future podcast generation. Is there an attempt on any of the platform to start a school or a lab or a writing program or a training program to create the new talent in the world of a podcast industry of the future? As any one of you have done that, and I think we should all know, our listeners should know, the people who are watching this show, some of the great work that you are doing, not only in creation, but also not of the program alone, but of the future and the future talent and workshops as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with a lot of DIY creators, as as you referred to them earlier, and work with them closely to grow their shows. So we now work with 63 different creators across shows. These are shows that we work with every creator at an individual level to grow them, to help them come from a cottage industry level to take it to a professional level, and that is all with the aim of, as I said earlier, audience growth and revenue generation. Do we charge them for it? In most cases, we don't. But the objective is, how do we see potential? How do we take this potential from 500 listens a month to 50,000 listens a month over the next quarter? What's required for that? How do we train? How do we coach them for voice, for edit? And how do we support them? So this is an ongoing exercise. It's not formalized, to be very honest. There are a few other efforts underway externally, but in terms of a formalized effort, there's not too much out there.
Can you give one example of the brainstorming in the way you are creating 63 studios? Can you give a good example for our viewers and listeners now to really take a motivation from you, Aditya?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of our earliest shows called All Indians Matter, and Ishani will bear witness to this, because we've seen the show grow very rapidly on Jiofuns as well. It's almost a 1-year-old show. We'll complete 100 episodes in the next month and a bit. And that show was born out of a passion project for a former journalist, where he wanted to talk about policy, current affairs. Over the period of the last 1 year, we've actually helped nurture that, created a special around it, around a book that was written by Tushar Gandhi, which has been released. That show today regularly ranks among the top 20 across every list you can find out there. There are more specials planned for it over the course of the next year. It's actually reached a monetization level, but given the nature of content, we stay away from monetization because it's hard news, very current affairs. So that's something where we've actually gone from a zero to a very, very large scale today to be amongst the top in the country.
Kiran, you have been producing hundreds of hours of contents for Audible, Spotify, and many other platforms. You've been dealing and actually creating new talent pool for many of your shows, including true crime and motivational, religious, and spiritual content. Have you spotted a new talent? Are you giving any kind of an acceleration or a training to this new talent that is emerging in this world?
So yeah, I think in the last 6 months we have been able to. We have moved completely from in-house to, trying to get our own internal team to do it, to actually sourcing a sort of a creator's room. You have a writer's room, and I do recollect having seen a panel earlier on writer's room. Right? I think the same concept for a podcast also is very, very relevant. So you could call it a writer's room or a creator's room or whatever that is. But I think that incubation. So while there is no formal process that's yet been instituted in terms of doing that, but what we have realized is the moment we start doing this open sourcing of content and we invite writers and content creators to come on board with and pitch more like an incubator's room, I think there's a significant optimism that creeps into that team when they actually talk to us, because they actually see somebody as partners who facilitate taking their content out to the market. I think this entire independent content creators to a platform need some degree of support in the middle, and I think we are helping facilitating that role. And I think we have seen a couple of them actually mushroom into somebody who's more popular in podcasts. We had a couple of folks who just did a podcast in the last year, and now as we speak, for the course of this year, we see the potential for them to do 3 to 4 such shows, right? And there's been significant interest on the platform side to say, hey, I like this genre. I like the way this person has approached the content. Let me have some more. So I think the moment we start incubating this content, incubating these writers to actually grow and having that good channel of communication and building it, now I think we are at that space where we'd like to actually formalize that approach, and we see some things coming our way over the next few months. We have done that to a certain extent with some of our global partners that we have in the UK and the US, where the incubator room has actually seen a bit of traction and a lot of respect, I guess, for the people who've actually created that content. Platforms have actually been able to see that and actually come out telling them that, this sort of an approach really works. And now to your point on an acceleration program, or either in terms of talent building or in terms of training or maybe even monetary, I think the time is ripe for us and other partners like us who work with us to actually seed this in the market right now.
Ishani, at Jio, are you taking some efforts in this particular direction?
Yeah, I was actually really excited to answer that question. Yes, definitely. So we've actually done this in a couple of different ways, right? We launched the Jio7 podcast hunt last year. We've come back with it, for a second round this year. With the podcast hunt, we actually opened out entries to, individual first-time creators to try and send in their entries for podcast ideas that they had, and winners were selected. And actually, we've groomed the winners that were selected were groomed. The podcast idea was, taken, molded, packaged, and put out onto the platform. But Yumi, which was one of the shows that actually came out of this, very, very quickly rose to be one of the top stream shows on our platform between September and March, which is when it ran. That was a completely, first-time creator that ended up making a podcast whose podcast performed really well. But aside from this, the other some of our really popular shows on the whole have all come from independent first-time creators. And what we've done as a platform, given that we have the sort of in-house expertise, we've taken ideas that have come to us, fleshed them out, and really put them out there into the Jio7 ecosystem. At the end of the day, we are a platform that has huge numbers, right, in terms of the actual consumers that are there. So when we identify ideas and concepts and put them out for our consumers to sample and listen to, they've actually done really well. Another example of this is a short format spoken word poetry show that we put out called Millennial Kavi. Rakesh Tiwari was a spoken word, still is a spoken word artist. And once his podcast went out there, we've seen the sort of engagement with him, with his content on the platform and outside otherwise as well. Another really popular storytelling show that we produced was Tumne Kisi Se Kabhi Pyar Kiya Hai with Laksh Datta. Ishtiaq will be familiar with him because he has also produced a show with him. But we took Laksh's show, and that is still one of, I think, in the top 5 stream shows on Jio7. So at that level, yes, as everyone has already very rightly recognized here, there isn't a formal process for, as an incubator, at an incubator program level, but at an individual level and an individual capacity, I think everyone, whether it's Aditya from a creator network point of view, or whether it's Kiran, Ishtiaq, everyone is doing something to sort of incubate individual talent and, sort of put it out there. Like, you don't need to always work with tier 1 celebrities to have a hit podcast. There is talent everywhere. And one of the best parts about podcasting is that it's so easy for anyone to produce a podcast and with the right sort of guidance for that podcast to become a really successful format.
I have an interesting example.
Sorry.
I think one of the best examples of almost semi-formal process is what Nilesh Mishra has done with his Gao Connection Network. You must understand that for over 5 years, every single night, there's a new story being narrated. So he has this whole network, which we partner with, where writers from across villages are able to write and send it across to him. The story gets a push because it's narrated by Nilesh. What we've actually succeeded in doing is there's an entire bunch of really great writers now who have come up who have the experience of writing stories. So all these are potential podcast stars because
yes, Khabar Lahariya has just won a prize at Sundance, which was created by that particular network. And thank you, Abe, for bringing that this thing. Ishtiaq Saab, you have started this audio movie, which I find it very, very interesting. And there have been some initiatives in North America as well about doing this audio movie. Do you have any idea? Do you have any thoughts on actually cultivating this as a kind of trial and testing methods before they actually launch into formal filmmaking, where costs are, exorbitant? In a manner of speaking, you've really actually, dirtied your hands or whatever you may want to say.
So clearly, Sunil, I mean, that is the vision. I mean, so the reason why we have even titled this as an audio film project is only because we understand the power of audio. That is one. The other thing is scripting is extremely important for something like which is as formatted as like a audio film project. We have gotten the best from the industry, like the Vikram Bhatt, who comes from a pedigree, I mean, of doing stuff, I mean, in this genre. But clearly, it was an audio first initiative for us, and our history at Red, I mean, is we've been curating podcasts for the last 5 years. We got into originals in the last 1.5 years, and this is again one of our heavyweight production. I mean,
sorry, we have to. If you can just wrap up, because there are other panelists waiting. I'm just being told. So if you can just wrap up quickly.
So that vision is there, but we would want to first create a use case, I mean, with the data coming out of the audio podcast, I mean, for the audio film project, and then that's the next level that we intend to take it to.
I thank all the panelists for putting in and bringing out the absolute A-lister writers, directors, performers, and the creators. An incredible flowering of creativity in the world of podcasts. Thank you very much. And any shortcoming from my side, I apologize. And have a good day. Thank you.
And from my side, Abe, my apologies. We actually wanted to give a lot more time to this session. I promise you, next year it's going to be at least an hour to 2 hours of audio content. And in between, we're going to do something on the in the side. Definitely, we'll come back to you all and we'll do an entire program. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.